Here, control of capital is controlled by money. You need billions of dollars to be a candidate in the US presidential election. And capital makes sure the money goes to the people it favours. Again, we take, for example, Hillary and Bill Clinton. $153 million paid by companies for Wall Street and American companies for speaking by Bill and Hillary Clinton. Well, I've heard some very good speakers in my time, but I've never heard anybody who was worth $153 million for delivering speeches. That was not speech. That is a way to get money to people in disguised form. In the US Democratic primary election, people think that it's run just by people voting. Not true. There are 712 delegates who are not elected by anybody. They're what are called superdelegates. And why were they put there? They were put there to make sure that Bernie Sanders isn't defeated by Hillary Clinton. It's very simple. In the worst, when there were more social terrible conditions, of course, you've had even more things, because there is, unfortunately, a history of political assassination in the United States. Several leading figures in the American political system, Martin Luther King, for example, were assassinated. Claim that what US policy is based on is democracy. Well, let me take your country. I'll take the country of Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, nobody has a vote. All political parties are banned. Women are not allowed to drive cars. Women are not allowed to travel without the permission of male relatives. Can you imagine this was Chinese women going to accept that they can't drive, that they can't travel without male relatives? This is totally undemocratic. Do you see, you would expect if the US foreign policy were based upon democracy and human rights, you would see a gigantic campaign carried on in the media against Saudi Arabia. None. Why? Because Saudi Arabia supports the United States. Take Bahrain. Bahrain is a country in which there is, again, an absolutist monarchy. The majority of the population is of a different branch of Islam to the ruling family. It has great repression. Why? Do you see great campaign carried out by the United States foreign policy against Bahrain? No. Why? Because the US has a fleet base there. Let's take another example, Hong Kong. Last year there was a big fuss over the question of the election of how you elect the governor of Hong Kong. The United States made a noise. Britain ruled Hong Kong for 150 years and never allowed the election of the governor of Hong Kong in any way at all for 150 years. But there were no complaints which came out of US foreign policy. Only when Hong Kong returned to China did we find complaints about this coming. This again shows that this policy was hypocrisy. China has raised 728 million people from poverty. That is the greatest contribution to human rights in the entire world, because I can assure you that nobody who is living in poverty is free. They don't have real choices. You take it, for example, a situation of child. If you're grown up as a child, you never grow to be the proper height you should be. You grow up with problems in your bones. You grow up with health. You die 7 or 9 years younger than you need to. Your human rights are no good under those circumstances. Others, fortunately, they then get when we advance from this, they need personal security. They want to pursue their own national way of life, not be dictated how they should live too. Let's take a comparison. The famous thing, women hold up half the sky. Well, let's be precise. Let's take the two biggest groups of women in the world, which is Chinese women and Indian women. And don't forget that Chinese women and Indian women, make up 1/5 of the world's population. A Chinese woman lives 9 years longer than an Indian woman. A Chinese woman is 93% likely to be literate. An Indian woman lives 9 years less. She has 1/3 chance not to be able to read and write. She has a 40% chance her children will be stunted because they're poor. 700 million people in India do not even have a toilet in their house. Do you think that the rights of an Indian woman, human rights of Indian women, are as good as the rights of a Chinese woman? You tell the women of India that they could live 9 years longer, read and write, and not have their children be brought up in poverty, and they were allowed to emigrate to China, I assure you several hundred million people would quickly go north of the Himalayas. If I say that China is the greatest achievement in human rights of any country in the world, it's because I've studied the other countries.